Hi, I'm Sam Cook, the Head of Customer Success for Nigel Frank. Thank you for joining me. I am presenting at the minute the Dynamics 2020 and Beyond Market Trends That Matter webinar. Doing a bit of series at the minute around these webinars that are all based on our salary survey. Today I've got the pleasure of being joined by Chris Huntingford of Microsoft. I believe you can't actually see him, but rest assured he is in his chaotic office, shed, drum kit storage place that he works from. Look, obviously, thanks for joining, Chris. Pleasure to have you on with this. I know we talked a little bit around this survey a couple of weeks ago now, and you thought there was some really interesting facts in there and wanted to get involved. So thanks for that.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me. And actually, you know what? This is really important, right? That we let people, we share this information with everyone. So for those of you that don't know, I'm a technical architect at Microsoft, but I've got quite a avid fascination with the community, and I work a lot in the community. And yeah, I just think that it's important that everyone, gets these stats. And I want to say thanks to Nigel Frank for getting these out there, because this is very, very important to the way we perceive and build our communities and work with our partners. So yeah, thanks for having me, Sam.
Yeah, not a problem. I will echo that. You do spend an incredible amount of time doing community stuff, as well as your job, obviously, doing webinars, interviews, and hackathons, and whatever else you can get involved in. I'm fairly confident you must own Bernard's watch, the amount of stuff you find yourself doing. So,
people would debate if I do my job or not, but I do like a good hack.
Right, so, well, it's you that said that, not me, but never mind. Never mind. Yeah, so there is a Q&A, which we are fairly confident we're going to chat away and run out of time for. So I think the plan is, if you've got questions throughout, I know Chris is keeping an eye on the question box, fire them in there. We'll publish them with some answers after the session. So hopefully a few of you guys will have some questions for us. So just a quick overview of what we're going to cover off today then. So I'll explain a little bit about who Nigel Frank are for anyone who doesn't really know us too well. I'll explain a little bit about where the data from today is coming from. Obviously, I've mentioned salary survey already, which is really the base point for all of this information, but I'll explain what that is in a bit more detail. We've then broken three topics as to what we want to cover off today, which we think are affecting either positively or could be doing differently within the Microsoft community. Actually, on certification there, obviously, that you can see a bit of a strange story that I thought of this morning, Chris, while I was looking at my notes. Obviously, after meeting you a couple of months ago, your sort of passion and enthusiasm for Power Platform got me to jump on Microsoft Learn and try and do my cert myself. You probably don't know this, but part of the reason I did that is when we were in the pub, Brownlee kept on saying that I was already studying for it. He kept on saying, yeah, Sam's got his exam booked in. It was something totally different, but I felt like at that point I had to sit it anyway.
Oh, so, good man. Good man. Good man.
Bit of a confession there.
Respect. I love that.
I think we also said that we'd make a point during this session of not just pointing at some cool data and saying have a read of that, but try and come up with some actions and suggestions for people as to what you can do, whether you're an employee, an employer, or somewhere in between. What you can do about these three challenges, and hopefully everyone will agree that there's been some actions at the end of the session. So that's what we're aiming for.
Yeah, and just to top and tail that, I'm going to be sticking some links into the comments as well. So as we go, if people need information, I'll do my level best to share what we've got from a Microsoft perspective and a community perspective, and hopefully that'll help.
Cool, thanks for that. So yeah, starting off then, who are Nigel Frank? We are the Microsoft aligned brand within the Frank Recruitment Group. So as a group, we've got various different vendor aligned businesses. So we work on a product, a regional and industry basis. So the guys you're speaking to from Nigel Frank should be as close to the community as they can be, knowing their product, knowing what goes on in the ecosystem, so that when you are working with us, you get more of a service than just CVs in your inbox or some interviews to arrange. There should be some good quality market information for people to have access to there. So, as I said, where is today's data coming from? Obviously, Chris, I know you're a big advocate for data and making sure it's right. So, thought it would be good to mention where we've taken these stats from. They're all coming from our salary survey. So, this is something that, as a business, we do every year. It normally means I get to stand at a booth somewhere at Inspire and hand out a nice document to people. Obviously, I've been robbed of that this year, unfortunately, but can't hold too much against that because everyone's in the same boat. Although it's called a salary survey, I think it's much more than that. And I know you've echoed that sentiment, Chris, that there's loads of information in here that's not just salary guide. You know, there's D&I information, obviously, there's education-based information, but also there's some really, really useful tangible information that you can take on salaries, whether you again are an employer or an employee. We've been running it for 12 years, and actually I'm really proud that our marketing guys can produce something like this. You know, we get access to tons of data, and it's great that we can turn it into something that actually we can give back to the global Microsoft community. So again, I think I'll mention this again later on, but for anyone watching, if you have got suggestions of you know, I wish I could get access to this information and some content ideas for the salary survey going forward, throw them our way. You know, you'd be amazed at some of the data we get. So let's see if we can use it into something that can benefit everyone. So looking at our first sort of main topic then, so diversity and inclusion. So if you look to the right-hand side of the slide here, you can see obviously that 18% of the people who responded to our survey were identifying as female. Obviously, a very low figure. It's in our view really that this figure does reflect the need for people, whether that's individuals or businesses, to be doing more to try and bring women into the STEM careers. Obviously, with an emphasis for us on the technology element of that. So I suppose that's really just food for thought at the very beginning about, for everyone watching, you know, what are we all doing as recruiters, employees and partners to try and create a more diverse ecosystem? And hopefully as we go through this, there'll be some good suggestions as to things that are already happening, maybe other companies are doing that you can borrow and try and make a difference yourself, really. Yeah, the second piece of data on this slide as well is interesting, I think. So there's a huge spotlight at the minute on diversity and inclusion, and rightly so. 30% of people saying that they're unsure of their employer's current diversity and inclusion policy. If you add in the 14% as well, who are basically saying they don't think their employer has one, that's close to 50% of the Microsoft community saying, look, we're not sure what our business is doing about D&I at the minute. And obviously that's something that we can all address pretty quickly, and I think is fairly urgent for us to look at. Obviously keen to get your thoughts on this, Chris, but my take on that really is, whenever we work with a business, we always obviously see what their careers page is all about and how they're presenting themselves. And this sort of stuff is always talked about. You know, there's some great information out there on what businesses are doing around diversity and inclusion. But I think it's worth businesses taking a bit of a look as to what they're doing to communicate to their current employees. You know, the guys you work with now, what do they think? And some great engagement businesses out there that I know and work with who can really help with this stuff to make sure companies are on the pulse with what the perception's like within their own company. But obviously keen to hear your thoughts as well, Chris.
Yeah, so I think, in my opinion, this is one of the most important things that we need to be looking at and should have been looking at from a very long time ago. And the way that I see it is this, right? And I'm gonna try and use an analogy here, and it may not make sense, so bear with me. Think about it like, I'm going to use tech as an explanation. So think about if I create an app, right? And the app that I create looks really cool. It's got a button in the top right-hand side, and it's got an awesome UI and user experience. And I start selling that app. Only a certain amount of people will start using that app because that's how the adoption goes. It's one person's perspective on how that app should look.
Yeah.
Now, what happens when I start getting more perspectives? So I start saying, okay, well, you know, I'm going to pick my wife. So my wife is learning how to code, and she's got a very different perspective on user experience. And her perspective is that it needs to be as simple as possible, whereas my perspective is it has to flow a certain way. So now you've got two perspectives. Your addressable audience grows based on those two perspectives. This is the whole concept around D&I. Now, a lot of diversity and inclusion messaging gets flung around quite a lot. Now, I don't particularly like some of the way that it's framed, but it's very important to be absolutely realistic about what happens when you bring different types of people into an organization. And what happens is that your addressable market grows because your perspective grows. And that's really key. Okay. Now, what I would love to say to every employer out there is that you need to take this seriously. It's very important. Do you know, let me give you an example. Do you know that when you're looking at building out accessible solutions, or solutions that are focused for people that may not have the same type of approach to the world as we do, okay, they have a mismatched interaction with their environment, which is effectively what accessibility is defined as, you change your complete addressable market to an extra billion people on the planet. Now, that's just talking about people with accessibility discussions or issues. But now, when you're looking at it from a gender perspective, it's the exact same thing. Look at it as you're growing your perspective, you're growing your addressable market. Do you know, and there's a slide later on in the deck, and I know there is, and we'll get to it, where there's another opportunity to grow your addressable market. But the thing is, as employees, you have to take this seriously. Employers, and as employees, you should be feeding back up to your employers to make yourself heard. And if you don't feel like you can, then there's a very, very different issue here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I think, you are right. It is about bringing other people's opinions and perceptions and ideas to the table. And you're right. I mean, I've worked with, not to steal our next couple of slides, but I've worked with some organizations recently, and one of your colleagues actually brought this to my attention, that different businesses are doing totally different things that are working quite well. And as you've said, we will come to that, but hopefully the stats on there are clear. There's definitely something we can all be doing to try and drive that balance to certainly a more even keel.
Absolutely.
So I thought with obviously with this data coming from the salary survey, it would be quite good to try and put the themes in the realm of what it means for salary. So again, we've got some really great data on this. So if we just look at the top line, really, 56% of people say that their employer pay equally. But as you can see there to the right, obviously the female response rate isn't quite in agreement with that. And you know what? I think obviously there's businesses all over the world report their pay gap. And I think there's a lot of analysis that goes into this. And one thing I will say, and this isn't just me plugging our survey, but obviously, I will while I can. Our survey is great for tackling this. If you're an employer out there, look at this information. The data is driven and sort of split out based on an experience level. So yes, there are different brackets for pay, but it'll be if you're a junior just getting started out, right through to what it means if you're the most experienced person in the marketplace. And it's obviously different per region, different per job, but there's absolutely no difference in there on gender. It doesn't say that this is what you should be paid if you're male or female. Just shouldn't be happening, really. And I think companies can use this as a benchmark. This survey and the data that's in there is great for exactly that. I think salaries obviously link really closely to retention, and I don't think anyone's expecting companies around the world at the minute to be talking about significant pay increases or anything like that. But I think it's certainly worth businesses taking this information that's out there and saying, well, it's so specific to the market we're in as well. Obviously, it's feedback from the Microsoft community that this is what they're earning at different levels. And give yourself the best chance of, one, balancing out the pay gap, but also retaining your great people by making sure that you're as competitive as possible on things like salary. And for people who are looking at this from an employee perspective, do the same thing. Use it as a benchmark. If you're applying for jobs at the minute and you're a little bit unsure about what the going rate is, check. The information's there to make sure that you're not pricing yourself too low and robbing yourself of a few pounds every month. But likewise, you're not totally against the market averages. So again, I think a big talking point at the minute, which is probably a different webinar in itself, is making sure that businesses out there are doing the right thing at the minute. Obviously, there's an influx of people who are unemployed and looking for work, and I think there's a real emphasis on making sure businesses are still paying fairly and not sort of capitalizing on that and trying to undercut people. But I think if we get into that, we'll probably we'll run out of time very, very quickly. So we'll probably talk about that issue separately.
Mm-hmm.
So as I said, we were hoping to try and bring some ideas to the table on what we're doing to tackle some of these issues. So a few things that we're working on at the minute. As I've said, we're set up on a product base, but we have a team that links all of that together, which is our Women in IT desk. It's a growing function for us as a business that we're actually really proud of. It's something I think that's quite unique. If a business registers a job with us, this team will always be looking for suitable applicants for them. They spend all their day networking around the Microsoft community with the eye for bringing in female talent. And that might be really experienced people, but also people who have got great skills who want to get into the channel. So, if you're looking to hire at the minute and you're looking to make sure that you've got a diverse workforce, they're a great team to help you find some people. So I think they're doing a great job. So shout out to those guys who are trying to make a change there. And again, if you want more information on what exactly that team does and how they can help you recruit, then give me a shout separately. As I said, we've got tons of information and tons of data, and we can use that on a sort of a consultancy basis. This isn't about you working a job with us. This can be talking to us about how companies recruit, how you can make your processes inclusive. A great thing that I've been talking to some customers about is what they do with employee resource groups, which I think what you were alluding to before, Chris, getting the voice of other people within your business. These resource groups aren't just managers, they're not heads of departments or anything like that. It's people who basically want to have an opinion, and it can be things on how you recruit, how you onboard your new team members, what you're learning in development functions, like how do you mentor people. If you only take your management level perception on that, you might get some great responses, but bringing in other people from other teams who don't necessarily have the agenda that they're hiring people or they're managing people can really give some different perspectives that can be really useful. I think that's what you were getting at before, Chris.
Definitely, and it's pretty important to remember, this can be broken down not only into, gender, sexual orientation, skin color, but it's also different frames of thought, right? And that's pretty important because, let me give you an example. I'm from South Africa. I'm a middle-aged white guy, sure, but I'm covered in tattoos. My thought pattern might be very different to everyone else's, and that's important, is to get diversity of thought in there as well.
Yeah, I think you're one thing people will certainly comment you for, Chris, is you're definitely yourself. You're someone who's not afraid to be themselves, which is a real skill. Not everyone's as confident in their own skin as you are, but you're definitely not afraid to be who you are, as proven by as we were talking before we went live about the chaotic work environment that you're sat in at the minute. Another thing, is which I think is really important in an initiative we're running, is it's for a slightly different ecosystem, but I think it's worth bringing up, is that we have a talent creation business. There's loads of talk at the minute about what are we doing to bring more people into the ecosystem. You don't want to just keep, recycling the same set of talent all the time. And I totally agree with that. That part of our business, it's called Relevant, and as I said, it's all about talent creation for actually Salesforce and AWS. But some of the diversity statistics that come out of that are brilliant. It's about bringing people into those ecosystems who are retraining and reskilling. Obviously, I know Microsoft have announced a huge campaign for 2021 to drive reskilling. That's exactly what our relevant program's all about. Another thing that I'd suggest actually is when you're thinking about your own partnerships as an employer, think about who you partner with to make sure that your process and the people looking at your recruitment are as inclusive as possible. You know, businesses talk to us all the time about terms of business and fees and rebates and all of that, you know, boring stuff, really, which is important, but it's boring. But we very rarely get asked, what are you doing as a recruiter to make sure that we're getting a diverse set of candidates? You know, what are you bringing to our search that's more than just looking in the existing talent pool? And I'd really recommend that anyone who's partnered with a recruiter at the minute goes out and asks that question. You know, you're trusting someone to help bring in talent for your business, bring in great people for your business. Make sure you know what they're doing, not just what you're paying them, basically. So I think this brings us on to the sort of the next section, looking at the age and experience demographic. Up there at the top, so this is which are the products people have worked with before they got into the Dynamics world. 40% of people responding saying they've only ever done Dynamics. Does that concern you if we've got people who have got one lens and it's all about the Microsoft world?
Well, what that shows me is we've got a high loyalty rating. But yeah, okay, so I do have an opinion on this. So the example I give is before I started off doing Dynamics, I worked for Borland, and I did, you know, at one point, and then I also did my own thing, and I was working in Interbase and writing Delphi programs. But I've had a bit of breadth. Now, what we're finding is there are shifts in the way that people move between the different, I want to call ERP, CRM packages, but you know, it's obviously a wider discussion than that.
Yeah.
I think if we could get people, and I bet you our competitors would say this, and that's totally fine, you know, more than open to that. If we could get people moving from the competitor products up into Microsoft and looking at, you know, the different solutions and how to implement them, I think that gives you a whole other lens. It's like you're changing the monocle, if that makes sense. And people with that sort of wider experience are awesome. But that's not to denote from the fact that people that have just done Dynamics, you have a massive breadth of functional skill as well as technical skill that can be used in other Microsoft areas as well. So I know this is a dynamic salary survey, but ultimately, if you look at it from a Microsoft ecosystem point of view, there's a lot of room to gain more experience, but we would also love to have people from, you know, places like SAP and Salesforce and that, working with the Microsoft product set. I think it's really important that, you know, we get massive amounts of experience from other solutions and other walks of technical life.
Yeah, and I think it echoes your previous point about just bringing in other points of view and other ideas rather than sticking with what we know. And look at the bottom there, you can see there is a decent percentage, 41% of people. And if you look at the names on there, obviously a lot leaning towards ERP. But yeah, it's there's definitely a lot of work can be done in cross training. I think it's a great recruitment strategy for people. You know, it is immediately bringing other experienced people into the ecosystem, which is great. But yeah, the other side of this slide on age is interesting. Obviously, Not everyone wants to tell us their age, and that's totally fine. But if you add those two top figures together, only 30% of people who responded under 35 years old. So we've either got a problem and they don't respond to surveys, and we need to think about how we address that market, or we're not bringing enough young people into the channel. What's your take there?
You know, this is a thing with me. Yeah. Totally. So yeah, it's a problem. It is a big problem. One of the things that I'm going to tell you that I think that when you're looking at the way solutions are built, and I'm a nerd, right? So I'm going to come at this from nerd mode point of view, right? When you're looking at the way solutions are built, look who's using the solutions. So we have a lot of people that are leaving school or leaving college that are moving into awesome jobs and are picking up the stuff that we're building, right? Now, I'm 37 years old, well, 37 next week. And so I'm still 36, yes. And here's something key, right? If I'm building a solution and I know, I don't like the term millennials. I just want to say, you know, somebody that's younger than I am. So let's stick with that.
Yeah.
Somebody that's younger than I am, if they're going to pick up the solution, man, we've got to make it awesome. You know, the way people use applications and the way people use software these days has changed completely. I mean, you know, my daughter's 5 and she knows how to draw stuff in apps and things, which is epic. But But that's key, right? Because the usability based on the generational gaps is important. Now, I'm not going to build an app for Jeff in accounts that's 85 years old, maybe, the same way I'm going to build an app for Mary that's coming from college and she's going to be, utilizing a system. So that's point number one. Point number two is that we need these people in tech. We need people to build these solutions. Now, I promise you, my skills, as much as I love to, say that I've been working hard to get certified and build up my skills base, these people will learn a lot faster than I am. I will. Okay, so that's the first point. The second point is that tech is cool. Tech never used to be cool. Tech is awesome, right? And I think that, what the point we're trying to get across is that a lot of people move out of college and school and go into other industries. But actually, one of the most amazing things is that when we run hackathons and when we do these types of engagements with the community, when we have youngsters there that have just left school or college, they love it. They love it. They love the build process. They love getting creative. It's a perfect symphony of left and right brains. So for those of you that are, just coming out of school and just coming out of college, know that there is something in technology for you hugely. So I would really encourage you. Let's bridge that gap. Let's make that 2%, 20%. That would be epic.
Yeah, and I think that there's, I think the way technology's evolved, and I'm not going to pretend I know more about this than you do, but I think we go on to talk about this actually. There are products now that are more accessible for people who perhaps just wouldn't have got into the technology world per se than ever before, and that's great. I think that'll help. It'll totally change. I think it'll add more people in every bracket that we've got there who are involved with tech in some capacity, just by the way that the products have started changing. And as you've said, it's definitely cool. So anyone who's saying that it's not has got that wrong.
I'd like to say that we're cool, but I don't know, man.
I'm going to say we are. I think a big part of this, and I do have a bit of a concern actually, that these numbers could actually get a little bit worse. And I think a lot of the requirements we see are for people who are going to hit the ground running. We get that phrase a lot. I need someone immediately who can hit the ground running. And I think that boils down to how businesses forecast their overall resources, their overall people and time. I know particularly the partners and the consultancy firms out there are always on a balancing act between utilization and winning new business and try not to overstretch people and then recruiting on an urgent basis when that balance falls the wrong way. There isn't an immediate fix for that other than really trying to know who your addressable hiring pool is. If you need that really experienced group of people, make sure you know how much access you have to them, because there's not an unlimited amount of people like yourself out there who can come in and do a job like that. So I think people and companies have to look at how they recruit earlier at that sort of, not necessarily more entry level, but bringing in graduates or bringing in cross trainers to try and offset that balance. And hopefully that means over time you're not constantly recruiting at the experienced end, which is where you pay a real premium to do so. But again, really happy to talk to businesses about who's doing a good job of that at the minute, how your recruitment strategy can look a little bit different, and let you know who your addressable market is. Depending on where you are in the country, although location's not as important anymore, it's good to know what your addressable market is. So again, talk to us about that if you're unsure. So I think we're looking next at what this means for education specifically. You're laughing already. I'll be quick on this slide and I'll let you give your opinion, because I know you're passionate about this bit, and rightly so. So 82% of the channel hold a degree or above. Some going out and getting doctorates and really getting educated. Fair play to those people, and we're absolutely not going to knock those people first and foremost. But EY, I think it might have been earlier this year or last year, dropped their really long-standing requirement that you have to be a graduate and in some capacity to apply for a job there. My take on this actually is that I think it's still quite a subconscious request that companies have, whether they, obviously with it being subconscious, whether they know it or not, but It's always on job specs, you know, somewhere in there it'll say something like degree is desirable, or we would accept degrees from this background. And then when we go and qualify that role with people, they'll tell us all about the person they want and the experience, and the degree never comes up. It's just never seen really from a hiring manager perspective as being an essential requirement. It's not a stat that we've got on the screen anywhere, but 74% of people who filled in this survey said that business acumen was one of the most important skills you can have. And I suppose my question to link this together is, does a degree give anyone business acumen, and does it just need to be something that we move past?
Yeah, I'm gonna respond with the typical South African approach and say no. And that's as direct as I can possibly be. I don't think a degree teaches you business acumen. I think, okay, so let me give you an example here, and I'm not saying this because I don't have one, because I don't, but I fall into the 6%. I fall into the high school graduate, and that was purely because I didn't have any money to study anything. And you know, in South Africa, you finish school, you either go to college and you study, or you go get a job. And I was like, well, you know what, I'll go get a job. So that's what I did. Now, what I think is I navigated the business world in a very different way to some of my friends did, where some of my friends did the typical get the degree, go and get a job. Once you got a job, you move up, you become the CTO, take over the world, whatever. My approach was slightly different. Like I just navigated the way that I wanted to, and I felt comfortable with, and I learned business acumen along the way, and actually business acumen that served me really well. So let me give you an example, like business savvy, or the concept of understanding business related scenarios is entirely in the beholder of the hand of the person that wants you to understand it. So let me give you an example, right? If my boss says, Chris, wear a suit and a tie and go and do a demo, sure, I'll go and do that. But if I'm going to go do a demo to a financial services organization, I know I have to speak a certain way, sometimes dress a certain way, and obviously try and make an impression on behalf of the company I'm working with.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, in the role I'm in now, it's a little bit different. And that's not necessarily down to the business sense. What it's down to is that I understand the need. The business sense tells me, well, how I engage with those people and how I qualify their need from a business perspective. In college, a lot of the time, the degrees that you get set you up with a certain set of guardrails or guide rails, whichever way you want to put it. And often you're taught to think in a certain way. Now, depending on your perception, that could be a really good thing for some organizations, but a lot of organizations want you to think out the box these days and want you to be a little less kind of guarded and guided and you know, promote ideas and thoughts and you know, variation. And that's why I think a lot of the time, from a business acumen perspective, I think that they aren't looking for degrees in that sense. I think it's sometimes just to evidence the fact that somebody can be dedicated to studying something or learning, not necessarily the business acumen.
I think there's an importance of being able to demonstrate you're able and willing to learn new things, because obviously we have to all the time. But I think actually a degree proves you can study.
Yeah.
if nothing else, you know, you can. Again, it depends what you're doing, and I'm definitely not knocking degrees here, but it proves you can study, and sometimes that's really useful. But there's obviously a lot more out there in the world than proving you can learn something. But that point of being able to learn does bring us quite nicely onto our next section. So certifications. LinkedIn recently, certainly over the last few months, has been, I'd say, busier than ever with people posting certifications and qualifications, which is great. I think I read somewhere that there's been 500,000 people since July. It's over 500,000, but if I try and read out the exact number, I'll bamboozle myself. Who have completed a Microsoft, a GitHub, or a LinkedIn Learning qualification. So, you know, a huge surge of people spending their time learning, which is great. And I think the figures here on the slide show that certification has a really positive impact, a positive influence on people's employability. You posted something, a picture where you'd managed to squeeze in just about enough paper of your certifications. There was just about enough space on the screen for them all. What's your take on their value? Obviously, you've sat a lot of them, but for everyone else, what's their value?
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you something that I think very quickly about the Microsoft certs, and then I'm gonna tell you what their value is. So back in NAM, I feel like some of the Microsoft certs weren't a great reflection of what you could actually do technically.
Yeah.
Fine. So we had to do them and keep gold status and everything. I think that's changed. I think that now the exams can be quite challenging. The certs can be quite challenging. I'll put it this way: they're certainly not easy. Okay. And when you do them, you have to have hands-on, interaction with the products. You have to have some sort of experience, which is really good, right? You can book learn these to an extent, right? And that's fine. But what these certifications prove is that you have actually done this stuff and you've touched products, which is good, right? So that's the first thing I want to get out. The second thing I want to get out is that certifications for me are really positive because they affirm that I know something, number one. So when I went and wrote the data analytics exam, I do loads of Power BI, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go write the exam, right? I went and wrote the exam, and you know what, Sam? I failed it the first time, and I was pretty bummed because I thought, you know what? Maybe I don't know as much as I know. So you know what I did? I went and studied up. I went and did dashboard in a day again, and I wrote the exam again, and I passed it. And I was actually pretty excited because I thought, you know what? This is evidence that I've actually learned something from the courses that I've done. So I think certs are important both from a personal perspective and also from an employer perspective. So as employers, when you're looking at to hire certain people, you can actually take the Microsoft exams as evidence of somebody actually having experience in a product, right? Which is really cool. So for me, it's a benchmark. The other thing is that when you're an employer and you have these people in your organization, it helps with your status as a Microsoft partner in receiving certain, rewards and opportunities in that. So certs for me, massively, massively important. And actually in the community, it's turned into a bit of a competition, which is quite cool. So yeah, it does give that competitive edge. Hope that makes sense.
Which is always good. And I think that's a good way of looking at it, then they're definitely not just for people starting out to prove that they've got the experience. It's good that it's actually good that someone really experienced can fail one, and have to go in and look at parts of the system and parts of the tech that you don't quite know and brush up. So yeah, I think that's a good, certainly a good summary. Obviously they've got different levels, but I think for people interested, I know a lot of our guys have started to try and sit some of their exams based on what team they're a part of. And, it's good to see people learning, whether you're going to use the technology every day or not. It ties in with that point before about showing you're able to learn. If it's not a degree, if you're sitting your certifications, it shows that you're dedicated to what you're doing, which I think is as important as anything, really. So again, let's see what certification means for salary, to keep with the salary survey theme. I think if you look at the figures there, in truth, the answer is not a lot. 72% of people are saying that their salary remained the same after certification. Now, I don't think that's too bad. I don't look at that as a negative. I think there's a stat in the survey that says 77% of people who had their certifications, who sat their certifications, had them funded by their employer. So I think it's looking at the trade-off. If you're sitting there thinking, right, if I do my certification, it'll guarantee me a salary increase. So obviously it doesn't seem to be the case, but it's a great thing for employers to say, investing in people. And we actually have a section of the survey which is all about employment perks and benefits, and they're obviously the importance of which have definitely changed over the last few months. And I think it's something, as you've said, companies should be offering. If you can, keeping in mind it's good to have other people's perceptions and other people's voices to an opinion. If someone goes out and learns something new or slightly just reconfirms their knowledge on something, it might give them that confidence to speak up when they've got the opportunity to do so. And again, I think any businesses out there should really be using this time at the minute to reassess what benefits they offer. The motivations of people all over the world have definitely shifted a little bit, and I know there's tons of studies going on at the minute around that. But yeah, it's something you should be looking at as to how you retain, what are you offering, and certs are a big part of that, I think.
Totally.
Chris, I'm gonna call you out on a little point here. 6% of our respondents coming from the MVP community. I know you're a big voice in there. We want their opinion, so yeah, make sure if you're an MVP and you happen to be listening, please give us your thoughts next time out. Would be appreciated.
Yes,
you're obviously
MVPs.
you're obviously in the community a lot, so it'd be good to hear from you guys. So this, Chris, is really, it's almost over to you at this point, because you've got a lot more experience in these next couple of slides than I have. So this is more about the customer decisions section of our survey. I know you've pointed out there's some great data in here that companies probably are interested in, but just can't find out a way to collect the data. So again, speak to us about that if there are things you want to learn. So this is how businesses are tackling an implementation. I'm a bit concerned for the 3% who don't know how they're going to undertake their project. I'd imagine they haven't gone too well over the course of the year. But obviously, you're very partner focused in your role. You spend most of your time dealing with the partners and obviously customers as well. But you're a big advocate for center of excellences at the same time. What do you think, in a nutshell, if you're looking at a totally new Dynamics or Power Platform customer, what should that split be? Is that donut chart about right?
That is a really tough question. So here's the thing, right? I think that the way solutions are being implemented is changing. I think that, as Microsoft, as a partner-focused organization, we obviously want to empower our partners to make sure that they have the ability to deliver solutions to customers. Now, what we're seeing is that a lot of customers are taking a lot of the stuff in-house and being able to do it themselves, which is cool.
Yeah.
The split is an interesting one. So I think it's always a good idea to get a partner involved. Okay, so in my opinion, the way that this should actually work is that the partner should be providing assistance from a compliance perspective, enablement, advisory, build, in whatever capacity. Partners can do everything from advise customers on how to build stuff to actually doing it themselves and supporting it, right? So in my theory, I think that every deal should have a partner attached, and then the customer should be picking up the tail and running with the rest of it, right? That's how, in a perfect world, I would love it to work, because it creates both opportunity for partners, opportunity for customers, growth of the way the platform's used, understanding of what the platform can do, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see this in-house employees piece, because what often happens is that the employees are then educated across the Microsoft stack, and as an example, like you said there, the Power Platform Center of Excellence, right? Great example of where in-house employees can start generating apps and services. But like I said, there are always moments when a partner is good to have. The example I'm going to give you is, what about data compliance and security? Do all those in-house employees understand that deeply? And if they do, that's awesome. But if they don't, you need partners to help you do that. Do all the in-house employees understand the concept of relational data structures and the ability to set up those application bases? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. But some of the stuff is really complex. So I always feel like, to reiterate, I always feel like it's good to get a partner involved. You can probably do a lot of it in-house if you are part of that 25%, but it's great to have that advisory information from a partner.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think we come to this in a couple of slides time, but I think businesses looking at the very beginning of a project, it's great to get that advice on how best to set up their team. And that, I think there's some good examples we've seen in the past of where partners and in-house teams work well. Maybe the partner gets involved in the recruitment process for the in-house team being brought on to make sure that they can work together well. And I think just setting that out at the beginning before a business maybe even selects their partner, of looking and saying, right, what do we want to do in-house, and how do we complement a partner with our own team, typically gives customers the best handle on their project. But again, I see what your point on that. Roadblocks. So where do things start going wrong? I think we can come to the top two in a minute, and again, they're pretty common things that we'd expect to see. But looking at the lack of skills internally up there in fourth spot, I think that sometimes boils down to kind of what I was just saying before: a customer potentially not knowing what skills they need before they get started, or not looking internally to say, do we have people who want to get involved in this, and do we have people that we can move around a little bit who may already have a lot of the skills that they need to get involved. I know we're seeing a lot of people getting involved in Power Platform through app making in particular, and I think there's a good opportunity for that to keep growing. But what's your take on the challenges here? And a question I'd want to ask is user adoption challenges at the top. Is that people just like me sometimes being a bit afraid of change?
Oh man, so first thing I'm going to say is I was surprised when I read this slide actually, because in the projects that I've been part of, the biggest issues that I find are integration and data migration. Obviously, user adoption is up there. Now, to answer your question, I think that there's a couple of challenges around user adoption. Number one, partners / organizations not having a proper adoption process within their org. That's key. Yeah, that adoption process, you have to be able to make people fans of what you've done, right? Building the best solution in the world is great. Having no fans of that solution, well, you know what I mean, right? Yeah. The second thing is also it comes down to design. And actually, in my inner nerd, I want to say that architecturally and from a build perspective, if your solution is built badly, it won't get picked up. And that comes down to education and skills, right? You've got to have the right people, you've got to have the right skills, you've got to be educated. And I think that's really important. I think that, you know, the other thing I want to bring up here, and Sam, this is quite key, is that when you're looking at I think it's point number 5, is difficulties dealing with partners. Okay. I just want to explain something to all the customers out there that are listening to this. The approach that partners should have with you and you should have with partners is not a vendor-supplier type relationship. It is a partner relationship where you work together to develop and build something. This type of stuff leads directly back into user adoption challenges where it's kind of like Lego. You go ahead and you go and tell somebody something.
You mentioned Lego.
All the time, man.
Bringing up Lego.
Yeah. So you go and tell somebody something that you want, and they go and stick all the bricks together, and then they give it back to you, and you go, yeah, that's not what I want. Can you go and build it again? And they go back and they build it again, and they bring it back, and you go, that's not what I want. The relationship is a partner relationship. You work together to define what you need, and you build and create together. You know, and I know that's really important. And in some of the projects I've been a part of, working together to generate the solution will eliminate a number of user adoption challenges. Right, and also will eliminate those partner difficulties. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, and I think again, it's striking that balance, as you've said. If it feels like a very transactional relationship, you probably need someone in there to anchor it together, and I think that can be actually where contract resource can come in as a great anchoring point. But we are slowly. Well, I would say we are quickly running out of time, actually. So I'm going to make sure we get on to the next section. So why would a customer choose not to upgrade? We hear about heavy customizations and people going down a rabbit hole. Point for there to make, you know, obviously making sure that businesses aren't just unable to make changes. You know, they've spent so much time customizing what they've got, and they don't know how to unpick that mess, basically. Again, you'll know more than I do, but Power Platform seems to be doing wonders for getting into some of the typically slow to turn industries and making a big difference. I mean, I think, you know, it was quite well publicized recently that DWF, obviously massive legal business, they've done some great work with one of the partners on some Power Platform and Dynamics work, which has helped really move their business, where in the past, obviously, the legal sector has been a difficult one to try and change. But actually, I want to focus on the bottom product, the bottom statistic there. 23% of people are not planning on upgrading because they're moving to a non-Microsoft product. What can we do to stop that?
Yeah, there's loads. I mean, this is also around education, art of the possible, understanding what's actually available, and also, you know, when I look at an organization like that, and I have worked with a number of organizations that have wanted to move on to a non-Microsoft product, and luckily been able to dissuade them. It's very much around understanding what the rest of the stack can do and why. Okay, and a lot of the time, you know, you might find people hammering square pegs into round holes, and that's why you think that you need to move to a non-Microsoft solution. But I can quite honestly guarantee you that there is pretty much every single possible thing you could require from a technical perspective in the stack. You just have to know it exists. And that's the key part to understand. The other thing is that if you're not happy with the product, you know, there's a lot of things you can do, right? You can always feed back directly to Microsoft. You can feed back to the product group and say, look, you know, we're not happy with this product. Also, remember from an implementation perspective, sometimes the product isn't implemented properly, which can come down to either yourselves as customers or partners. Very good way to feedback to them and let them know. But always feedback, don't just move, because there are always options.
Yeah, so make sure you're speaking to the right people and getting your concerns out there. Yeah, makes sense. So I think we are looking next at a few product trends. I haven't just put this in here because I know it'll please you, but obviously Power Platform gaining a lot of traction, as we've kind of talked about quite a bit already. But I've said it before. I think Power Platform is going to really help close the skills gap, and I know we've definitely talked about this in the pub before, that people are getting that chance to get involved in technology who perhaps wouldn't previously, and it's about running with that. You know, if you're someone who's just getting started, maybe getting involved in a bit of app making for your company, then speak to us. I'm sure Chris is always open to talk to people about pretty much anything about how you can make that part of your career going forward. And that's not me saying change jobs. It's absolutely not. But speak to us about, this is where I'm getting some experience at the minute. What route should I be asking my current employer to go down? Where can I learn more? We can put you in the direction of some places to study and do your certifications to make sure you can stay in the tech world almost. So I do think Power Platform is going to really introduce a lot of people into tech roles who wouldn't have before.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I will say is that, we're getting people that used to work behind checkout counters in airports, drive buses, serve food at restaurants. They're building apps. Yeah. They've completely changed their careers from that into tech, which is awesome. So we welcome anyone, whatever your skill set. It's always awesome to talk to people that want to get into the technology.
Yeah, and likewise, we're always up for advising people on where their career can go next, whether it's an immediate move or whether it's just a plan for the future. So get in touch if you've got any questions around that. Final point, just before we start wrapping up, 30% of end users are planning on using some AI features in their system going forward. That seems low. AI and RPA and Power Automate can do some really cool stuff. Do you think that figure's so low because people just aren't sure how best to use those products?
Mate, the figure's so low is because people aren't fully in tune with what they actually do. And the second thing is there's the fear aspect. It's kind of like watching a horror movie where the door slams shut behind you and you're like, oh my gosh, why did the door slam shut? The only reason you're afraid is because you don't know what closed the door. But here's the thing. If you do, and you do understand a little bit about what's under the hood, it's much easier to accept the fact that that AI and machine learning is in everything. It's in PowerPoint and it's in Candy Crush, it's in Tinder, it's everywhere, right? So you're using it every day. It's just part of our product suite that we offer. And actually, here's the thing. 30% of end users plan on utilizing AI and ML in apps. You probably already are.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've certainly tried to get us to look at what we could do with Power Automate. I had a little play around with it to see if, I'm not sure if he's watching, but I tried to automate my manager Gov at one point, but I wasn't able to quite crack it. But I keep learning. Yeah, so I think we're going to finish about on time. So just a bit of a summary then on the points that we've gone through. I think, we've looked at three sort of key themes. And as I want to reiterate, this is three of many different topics which are in our survey. So from a D&I perspective, I think it's important to think about how you communicate that policy. What are you telling your guys internally, and making sure that you're giving people a platform to have a voice, not just within their current job, but a voice on what goes on within the business. And have a think, if you're out there recruiting at the minute and you keep finding you're seeing the same type of candidates, or you're not seeing enough diversity or whatever it is, just think about what your current recruitment methods are, and are they challenge your recruiter? What are you actually doing to make sure that our candidate pool is growing? And they should have answers, whether that's us or someone else. We should all have answers for that. Training and certs, as an employee, think about what the benefit of a certification is. There's loads of schemes out there at the minute as well, which are encouraging people to learn, to go away and find out what they are. likewise, I know you've been sharing some links, Chris. There's tons of good learning material out there at the minute if you want to get stuck into that. And from an employer perspective, just think about how you're supporting your people. You know, what's the benefit? Yes, you know, some of the certs can cost a few hundred or a few £1,000s at times for people to get through, depending on what you're doing. Just make sure that you're looking at it as a mutual benefit. You know, don't risk losing people to a competitor because they're encouraging people to learn. You should always be encouraging your team to learn. And customer decisions, the final few slides we looked at, you know, get advice on how you're structuring that overall project team. You know, your project team's people that you're working with from the partner channel, it's your own employees, and it's the freelance resource that you're bringing in to bring this whole project team together. Make sure you're getting advice on what that should look like. You know, and again, I think I mentioned user groups in a sec, but user groups are a great source of that information. You know, you learn a lot about different projects that have gone well and different pitfalls. If you're not part of the user groups, there's tons of them out there. They're great. People are always willing to help. And yeah, I think that brings it together. If you're a customer, speak to other people about their challenges. Don't feel like you're on your own with them. And that is it. Obviously, we keep talking about salary survey. For anyone who hasn't got a copy of it yet, feel free to scan the QR code there, which will let you download a copy. I will happily share more information with them and share a copy for anyone who wants one. So if you've got any questions about the survey, or like I said at the beginning, if you want to get in touch to make suggestions as to what we can do next, give me a shout and I'll see what we can do with our data for next year. And that is it. I know there's been I hope there's been some questions going in the chat box throughout. Me and Chris will get to these once we wrap up here. I think we're going to publish all the questions and answer them as we go. Just want to thank everyone again who's dialed in and watched. Hopefully you've had some takeaways to these challenges. Hopefully you found it interesting. And obviously, Chris, thanks again for helping me out and putting some context behind this data.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's been awesome.
Not a problem. Thanks a lot. Thanks again for watching.
Thanks, everyone. Have an awesome week.
Cheers.